There's this story in the Bible about this group of people that went through their own kind of lockdown. Although their lockdown was probably a lot tougher. It meant that they were ripped apart from their home, their families, and they were forced to be under another government and another rule for a long period of time. This is the story of the Israelites who went into exile to Babylon. And the reason why that story comes to my mind is because I feel like some of the fears and thoughts and sentiments that they had are some of the fears and sentiments that we share. Even though maybe our lockdown is a lot more comfortable and with a lot more opportunities, it still causes us to feel the same way or similarly. Fear, despair, anxiety, confusion, um, wanting to know what God's gonna do about it and how can we trust Him and what will He accomplish through all of this. Some of the questions that these guys and girls probably had as they were in their own kind of lockdown and exile. But what's interesting to me is that the exile that they went through wasn't because of a virus, was actually because of their own doing. God selected this group of people called the Israelites to be a kingdom of priests or a nation of a set apart group of people. People that would live differently with different values and morals and that would show to the world that you can live in partnership and you can allow God's wisdom to guide you and the whole world would benefit for that. And that was the point, and yet they chose to redefine wisdom in their own eyes, and instead of becoming that set apart nation, they became like everybody else, desiring power and oppressing the most vulnerable and the ones that are in need, and forgetting about all of those who God calls them to care for. They become an empire like everybody else. So God has to teach them a lesson. And His lesson is to take them for their own kind of lockdown, their exile. And that theme of exile is something that we've been hinting at for the past couple of days. And it's a theme that is actually quite important in the Bible. And it's been in my mind this past week. It's been in my mind a lot as just how did they do it? How did they go through their lockdowns? How did they endure exile? What kind of motivation or perspective? And is there anything that we can learn from that? Because exile is not something that only happened to the Jews. If you read the Bible as one story, you would realize that the authors of the Bible are trying to say that exile is something that we all actually go through. Not necessarily physically, but maybe as a state of mind or in the tension of what we feel in our hearts. Think about it. The Israelites are taken captive to Babylon because of the oppression and sin that they committed. And they go there for 70 years. We are so impatient 20 days into it and we are already complaining about an extension of 2 more weeks. Imagine being 70 years in exile. For 70 years not knowing what to do or how to go about it, and always feeling the uncertainty and fear and confusion. But that story is the story of the Bible. If you go to the first pages of the Bible, what you find is the same offer that God gave to the nation of Israel is the same offer that He gives to humanity. He creates this good world and fills it with all these good and amazing gifts, and then He allows humans and He invites humans to participate in a partnership. He tells them, hey, let's rule and reign together in this great creation that I've just made, and we'll propagate it, we will make it even better together. All you have to do is lean on my wisdom. Trust my wisdom, and we will rule and reign together. And by page 3 of the Bible, you might already know what happens. Humans redefine wisdom in their own terms, and instead of partnering with this amazing God that has invited them to be set apart, they actually try to do it in their own terms. And if you keep reading the story, they have to be banished out of this place where God and them lived together. This place that is called the Garden of Eden. They're vanished almost into their own exile. And if you keep reading the story, it gets more dramatic because this redefinition of good and bad, this wisdom in our own terms, leads to murder and despair and decay and a lot of chaos, reaching its climax in Babylon. Or maybe you know the story of the Tower of Babel. Humans, because of their redefinition of wisdom, create Babylon. And Babylon is not a place in the story of the Bible, not a physical place. It is sometimes, but what the authors of the Bible are trying to get us to think is Babylon as a symbol of a system or an institution or even a worldview that is so corrupt by their own redefinition of good and bad that it entangles us in this system, in this worldview, in this institution, that it just keeps on creating more and more chaos, more and more pain, more and more suffering. And if you keep reading the story, right after Babylon, God calls out this family and he tells them that through this family, there's going to be one guy who's going to change the whole picture. And you know that man. His name is Jesus. And he comes out of Babylon because this world is Babylon according to the authors of the Bible. And he lives by a completely different set of values. He is like that first human life who had the opportunity to live by the values of God, but living in the world of the values of this new Babylon. Yet he doesn't conform, and he chooses to show a different way of living, a different kind of humanity. And at the end of the story, he defeats Babylon. He defeats Babylon not by oppressing them, but by himself being given up. And you find in the last pages of the Bible a new garden, a garden city who is called the New Jerusalem, where heaven and earth are together once again. And that's where the story is leading you. It's pointing you this entire time that we are in exile, but we're going to be restored. So exile is actually a way of explaining the human condition. Exile is actually a central theme in the Bible. The entire Bible is put together around that narrative that you and I are in exile. You and I are in Babylon. In Babylon, not as a physical place, but as a state of being, as a mindset that is continuously propagated by the human corruption and the total depravity of our own redefinition of wisdom. By us taking for ourselves and calling what is good evil and what is evil good. And you know about this. Who of us has not experienced pain or suffering or ache, or we see the world and its corruption and its corrupt leaders and its systems and the oppression that so many people suffer because of the decisions that people with power make, or the decisions that people like you and me make. We see the suffering of our own resentment and our own hypocrisy and our own tendency to consume and consume without caring for those who do not get or do not have or don't have the opportunity. It's in every level and in every sphere. It's not just those few who are bad or those of us who are good. It's all of us have fallen trap, and all of us are in exile. Exile is now the human condition. And it's right there in that trap, in that despair, in that exile, that some of the greatest writings that we've been looking at lately are found. You find the story of this guy named Daniel and his three friends. Like these three guys are thrown into a fiery furnace, and you might have heard of that. Or the book of Isaiah or Jeremiah or Ezekiel. And all over and over again, the stories of people who are living in this despair and in this tension between knowing what God is saying and the reality that they're experiencing. And you and I might live in that tension where we feel and see and experience the depravity and despair and confusion of everything around us. But there's something that we know that doesn't fit that reality, and yet we want to somehow work it out together. That is living in exile. That's what this whole book is all about. So to not make the story too long for you today, I will invite you to go to one of the most famous passages in the Bible. Probably one of the top 3 most quoted passages in the Bible. You might even know it. People that don't even believe in God probably know it because they've seen it in a postcard or in a magnet or on Facebook somehow. But it's one of those passages that is heavily misunderstood. If you go in your Bible to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, I knew you already knew we were going to go there. But we're going to read a little bit before verse 11. And I want you to have in mind what we just discussed. The physical, literal exile that these guys are going through. And also the cosmic nature of the exile of humanity because of our rebellion and sin. Jeremiah is not in Babylon. He's writing to them from somewhere else, telling them, hey, God is trying to send you a message. And they're reading a letter from this guy named Jeremiah, and they're probably expecting or hoping for some good news. Some really good news that, man, that we're going to get out of this and God's going to come out on top because God is never letting us down, right? And you might already guess what verse we're going to read. But we're going to start from verse 10. And this says Adonai, after 70 years for Babylon are complete, I will visit you and fulfill my word toward you to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans that I have in mind for you, declares Adonai, plans for peace and not calamity, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you will search for me with all your heart. Then I will be found by you, says Adonai, and I will return you from exile and gather you from all of the nations and from all of the places where I have driven you, says Adonai. And I will bring you to the place from which I removed you as captives into exile. You probably know verse 11. And you probably know that God has a future and a hope for you, and He doesn't want you to suffer, right? But the verse right before it, He tells them that they're going to be stuck there for 70 years. How's that comforting? I mean, how many of us are going to be able to make it another 70 years if we were hearing this today? For the people hearing this letter and reading this, as they are hearing it from the first time, this is probably not comforting news. They are being told that they're going to be in lockdown, in exile, until they die. Maybe their children or their grandchildren will get to go back home, but them? What are they hearing? They're not hearing, oh yeah, God's gonna give you a house and a car and all your businesses are gonna succeed and in everything you do, because God wants all your things to succeed, because God has a plan for you, for a future, not to bring you calamity, but to give you hope. It's all about you, right? Well, that's not what Jeremiah is saying. Jeremiah is saying you're gonna be stuck there for the next 70 years. And the temptation that every single one of us would have after hearing that is like, no ways. How could God do that? How could God let us go through something like that? And the very next response to the how or the why question is because He knows what He's doing. Because He's the one in charge. Because He is the one with the plan. Not you, not me. We don't understand the circumstances, yet He does. But if you have the context of exile in mind, the physical context that they're going through, that they have been cast out into exile because of their rebellion, you understand that this verse is not about their profit or their prosperity. This verse is about
the relationship that they have let go of, the beautiful partnership that they were invited to, but that they completely forgot. That rule and reign they could have done by God's wisdom, but that has now become empire and oppression because of their own wisdom. They have become Babylon. So God is telling them, I know what I'm doing, and it's going to take 70 years. But if you get the lesson, then you will seek me, and you will find me. When you seek me with all your heart, and I will know you, and you will know me, and I will bring you back from your exile. Yes, in a literal sense, they did go back after 70 years. But think about it in the cosmic sense, in the way that the entire Bible is trying to tell you the story that exile is the human condition because of our depravity and our nature and our rebellion. Think about that just for a second, that if exile is all that we are going through at all times, this tension and this despair and this inequality and injustice and oppression that we see every day, even in our own hearts and in our own lives, that we're confused and totally like just looking for an answer, that God says, I can take you out of exile. I can tell the exile out of your life. And it's all done through a relationship. That's the plan. That's the hope. That's the future. That if we invest in this one relationship, He might not take us out of exile, but He might take the exile out of us. We might be living in this confused world without many answers, but we will have this one relationship that will give us hope in the middle of hopelessness, that will give us purpose in the middle of despair and calamity, that will give us the endurance to persevere even if it's for 70 years. Exile is the human condition of our rebellion. Exile is what they had to go through at their own time. And exile is what you and I live through every single day. And we better find a way to learn how to live in this exile. We might not be in lockdown for 70 years, at least I hope not. But we are going to be in lockdown spiritually. In lockdown from this world that is oppressive, in this worldview that is sinful and rebellious, until somebody locks us out. And that someone is that relationship that Jeremiah is talking about. That verse 12 and 13. Will you seek for Him with all your heart? Will you search for Him? Will I invest all that I can into this one relationship, even if the exile is the reality that I always see, but not the reality that I live by, because I can be freed from this exile through this one relationship. That's what Jeremiah was referring to. And that's what the story of the Bible points us to this one man who's also God, who can free us from the exile of our souls and our hearts and our minds. And He will one day restore every single thing back to the way it should have always been, including your life and my life. And He is the hope that we hold on to. He's the hope that Jeremiah was referring to. He's the future that we can all grab hold of right now. Will you search for it?